The Lead. Sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC. Welcome to The Lead, everyone. I'm your host, Al Blanton, and today we have a very special show for you. Our guest is a longtime banker and sports enthusiast and one of my favorite people in Jasper, Al McAdams. Al, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Well, it's good to see you, man, and as always. And, you know, there's so much that we could talk about, and what I really want to lead off with is that 72-73 Walker Viking basketball team, which you're a part of, and kind of tell us a little bit about that team, you know, walk us through the season, tell us about the roster and your memories from that season.
Well, in the off season between the year four, I'd been on B team, but the varsity had a really good team. Most of that team was coming back, and the whole town was talking about it, you know. School started on a Monday. We started conditioning the next Monday, and it was really intense.
Was Coach Green the coach?
Herbert Green was the coach. Great high school basketball, great college basketball coach. Played at Auburn, was a really good player at Auburn. And this was his 7th year at Walker. He had won 20 or more games every year there except one. He'd gone 17-7 that year, so very successful. And so it was just building up to the year. I mean, his practices were 3.5 hours every day.
Yeah.
Very intense. We moved into the season, you know, it was 6 days. If you didn't have a game, we practiced every day, and then on Sunday afternoons. But it was every game was a sellout with standing room only. We played really a tremendous schedule.
Yeah.
And we played Gadsden. They had a 6'9" high school All-American named Ricky Brown. He was a great player at Alabama. And they had a great team the year before, had everybody back. We beat them. And we played Hoover. It's Berry back then, but it's Hoover. Yeah. They were the Jefferson County champions. We played them on their home floor, blew them out. Mm-hmm. We played Inslee, had a 6'8" guy that signed with Alabama and a 6'11" guy that weighed about 280, and he was better than the guy that signed with Alabama. We beat them. We played McGill and won a game that's so many people in Jasper remember, because we played Theodore of Mobile the night before, and they came up here together. And then at 2:00 on Saturday afternoon, we played McGill. They were ranked second in state in the largest class. We were in the largest class, which was 4A. We were ranked third, and we beat them, and we went to number one the next week. And
where were the home games played back then? Songer didn't exist, right?
Songer did not exist. It was the old gym. I think it was built in 57. And it was a great atmosphere for basketball.
This was on the campus of Walker.
Was it
Walker County High School then?
No.
When did it become Walker?
My 10th grade year, which would have been the 72 graduating class, was the first year it was city school. But that gym, it sat about the same amount of people that Walker College did. It had seating on 3 sides, and it was just, you know,
raucous atmosphere.
Yeah,
I bet. Yeah.
And the fire chief would stand by the door, and when the standing room, when they got shoulder to shoulder, he'd lock the door.
Yeah.
Every game.
Now, at one point, I think games were played at Scher Auditorium. Was that back in the early 50s and 40s?
Yeah, that was
okay. Tell us a little bit more about the roster of that team. I know there were really great players on the 72-73 team.
The seniors, there were 4 senior starters on that team. Tony Price, who was really good, tough, hard-nosed. He was point guard, very fundamentally sound. The other guard was a guy named Ronnie Daniel. He was from Union Chapel. He was a great defender, good role player. And then front line was Chuck Justice, was a small forward. Chuck played football at Alabama. He was a really good all-around athlete. And Ronnie Shaw, a real leader on the team. He was a center, about 6'8". We had great size. And then we had a guy named Robert Page, who's 6'6", and he made high school All-American. He was my age. He was a junior. And then we had some depth. Sammy Lee was 6'5". Sammy had been he was 6'5" in the 7th grade. But Sammy walked on at Alabama and made it, and he didn't even start on that team.
Yeah.
He was a junior. Leon Harton was a good backup point guard. And
what position did you play?
Forward. I wasn't quick enough to play guard, and I wasn't big enough to play forward, really. But
now, were you kind of a bruiser, or were you more of a silky? What describe your game back in the day?
Hustler, fundamentally sound.
Right.
Just that kind of guy.
Blue collar.
Yeah. I wish I'd have known what I knew when I got a little bit 2 years older that year.
How far did the team go, and what was the final record?
We were undefeated regular season. Back then, the Tennessee Valley Conference tournament was a big deal. It was all the teams, Huntsville, Decatur, Tri-Cities, Coleman and Walker. And we made it to the finals, and we played Austin and Decatur. And they beat us 2 in the finals. They won the 4A state championship. And then in the regional tournament, we played the defending state champions, Winona, and we got 12 down, came back, tied it up, and they kind of scored right there last seconds of the game, beat us 2. They played Austin in the finals and went to overtime. Austin beat them 2 in the finals, so we lost those 2 games. And then we lost in the Christmas tournament final to Phillips of Birmingham, who we beat twice during the regular season.
You've seen a lot of basketball. I mean, do you think that's probably the best team that Walker's ever put on the court?
Well, I always say they had that Sports Hall of Fame, Walker High School Sports Hall of Fame, and they only put 2 teams, the whole teams in there. I was glad they did, because that was the only way I was getting in, But the 57 state championship football team and our basketball team.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier, we were talking earlier before the show, and you were mentioning Coach Clem's influence on that team. And, Coach Clem, I think he got there in 67, is that right?
57.
57. So he had been there for a while. And
before I can even remember, But I started to go into the games when I was in the 5th or 6th grade, and you just didn't miss a Walker College home game. All the kids my age, they were there. We sat in a group. Coach Clem loved that, But they were so dominant. When my first memories of Walker College, they were in the Dixie Conference, which was a group of teams out of Alabama and Tennessee.
Hiwassee and teams like that.
And then the Alabama Junior College Conference was formed. And the first 5 years, they were in the finals all 5 years, won 3 of them. But, it was just, Coach Clem was such a great promoter. He was so charismatic, and he just, he just made it so fun. And so everybody went to the games. It made you want to play basketball. Football was really down at that time. I think 5th, 6th, and 7th grade years, Walker didn't win a football game. And they weren't too good after that. So people had something to rally around. Basketball gave them something.
So he kind of got the basketball culture.
He did.
Going strong in this community. And those guys that were playing on that 72-73 team, they had grown up watching Walker College basketball. And you mentioned that he had camp, and then there was kind of a hiatus where he didn't have camp.
He did, and Coach Clem, he lived right. The corners of our yards touched, and he gave me he had a box in the trunk of his car, and he gave me a couple of Glen Clem basketball camp shirts, and they were treasures to me,
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
wore them all the time, wore them out.
Was it the one where it started out here and then it was kind of the motion of the shot and then jumping up? Was that the went across
that
the
was
chest?
too high tech for
Okay,
this.
yeah.
Just Glen
This was
Clem
back in
stuff.
the '80s, so
Yeah.
when we instituted those T-shirts.
These
okay.
would have been from the '60s.
Right, like old graphics.
Yeah. But I wish I could have gone to his camp.
Yeah.
I know that would have been rewarding. And
I mean, now that you mention it, I mean, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but I mean, I've said that it was almost like a vaudeville act, but in reality, he was almost like P.T. Barnum. I mean, he was, to your point, he was such a great promoter. And camp for us was an absolute blast.
I was thinking this morning about Coach Clem, how he knew where all the coffee tables were in town and all the businessmen, and he made his rounds. On Tuesdays he went up the Holiday Inn. I don't know what days, but Wednesdays he went down to Vance's drugstore. But and he got the whole community that way behind the program, and it was
go to Carol Bochel's and have coffee with Carol,
yeah.
In the mornings, and he was really great at that. And I think and I was the head coach at Walker College / Bevel State for 2 years, and I was only there 2 years and didn't have great success, but it was amazing to me how much he did in the community and how much he got that support, and to be able to do that for 37 years is absolutely incredible.
It is. Most years he didn't have an assistant. It was a one-man show. He had a very small budget. He had a limit of 10 scholarship players for the majority of his coaching career. So I remember they got down to 7 players one year, but yet still tremendous success. Imagine 7 players coming out to warm up. You can't hardly do layups, And, he was amazing.
Who are some of the players? Let's talk players for just a minute at Walker College. Who are some of those players that you kind of like to watch growing up? For me, it was Paris Bryant and Roger Crawford and those guys that came later in the late, John King but for you, late '60s and throughout the '70s, who were some of those players at Walker College that you remember?
The first one that comes to mind, and I think every kid around my age, he was the hero for us, was a guy named Ott Knight. And Ott Knight probably didn't average either year over 6 points a game. But next to Pete Maravich, he was the best ball handler and passer I've ever seen. Yeah. And he had this cocky attitude that just, he was a show to watch him.
Yeah.
And
I heard a story about Ott one time. He got injured and he was laying on the court, and the trainer comes over and says, "Ott, how are you doing?" He said, "I'm fine, but how's the crowd taking it?"
Oh yeah, that's it was actually Phil
don't know
Schumacher.
if that's true or not, but
it is true. But it was Phil Schumacher.
It was Schumacher. Okay.
He had already passed out about 5 assists to Phil, and Phil was another great player there. Phil Schumacher.
Now Phil came over to Ott and said that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Ott said, "Got it. I want to get my story right."
Yeah. And Phil was a great player there. Pat Cowart, who started at Auburn during those years, he was a forward. Murray Argo from Jasper. There weren't many players from Alabama. A lot of the players were from the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky. And sometimes there would be a player from Tuscaloosa. But Murray Argo was a guy, he was like 6'6", 220 when he's in the 9th grade. Yeah. Great high school player at Walker. And he got 40 in a game his freshman year at Walker College.
Yeah.
Guy Mike Nelson, same age as Murray, and about the same size. Both of them were, I think Mike Nelson was like 6'7", about 235, something like that. Yeah. They were both big, wide bodies.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of Kentucky, I know that Coach Clem got Coach Rupp and Wooden to come to Jasper, right? What do you know about that?
Coach Rupp spoke to the Blue Tie Club banquet twice, and Coach Wooden, I mean, that's just amazing to me that he would even ask John Wooden at that time.
The gall to
Yeah.
ask, the
The
Wizard
greatest-
of Westwood.
That's right. People who don't know, UCLA won national championship every year.
10 out of 12 years.
Yeah.
10 in a row, I think, right?
Yeah, right. And he got him, and Coach Clem just thought big,
Yeah.
and he told me one time, he said, "What do you think about our games being on live television?" And there had been some sports on the local station, but it had been reruns, and I said, "Boy, I think that's great." He said, "Good, you're one of the announcers." And I didn't think I was cut out for it, but I did it for 4 years.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. They say that after the joke is that after Rupp came to stay with Clem when he spoke to the Blue Tie Club, that Clem never washed the sheets again.
I believe he loved Alabama football and Kentucky basketball.
Speaking of promoting Walker College basketball, tell us the Cadillac story.
Oh,
You've got so many stories, Al. We want you to regale us with some of your Clem stories.
it would have been the 81-82 season. And that group was a special group. They made it to the semifinals National Junior College Tournament their sophomore year, but they were coming in their first day, and he had them coming into the gym, and he was standing outside there shaking their hands as they came in a line, going, "Welcome to the Cadillac of junior colleges," and
he was right.
And he was right. Yeah.
He absolutely believed it. One of my favorite stories about Coach Clem was a story about Buford Daly. And I think it was my sophomore year at Walker College, and we were playing at Lawson. And Lawson was one of the toughest environments to play at. And we didn't have a particularly good first half, and we'd gotten back into the locker room, and I guess the manager, somebody brought the stat sheet over to Coach Clem, and Coach Clem was taking a look at it and looked up, and we had our power forward, Richard Eaton, was in the locker room and had 0 rebounds at halftime. And Coach Clem classically said, "Guys, I want to tell you something. There's a guy not too far from here laid up in the morgue in a ruffled shirt. Name is Buford Daly. And Buford and Richard are tied for rebounds." And just, he could bring humor into a situation, into a teaching point, and that's one I'll never forget. And what's your favorite Clem story, or?
Oh God, there's so many of them. I remember one time he got after this official, and he was really on him, and they sat on the baseline at Walker College's gym, and that official had to take the baselines. So Clem got up, and got his arms crossed, and the official came down there, and all of a sudden the crowd just kind of got silent, and I heard him say, "I'd love to get my hands on the guy that gave you your first whistle," I thought that was so funny.
Talking out of the side of his mouth.
Oh, yeah. He, I coached his son 2 years in junior high basketball, and Coach Clem called me one night. We were like 7-0, and we played this team out of Florence, and we kind of hung in there for a long time. But at the end, they beat us. They were really talented, and Coach Clem, we were running this offense against a man-to-man called the Auburn Shuffle. And he called me up, and he was having a bad year. He had probably the worst talent I had ever seen him have up there. And you know how he always scheduled the toughest teams he could get.
Three Rivers and Hiwassee. And
so they were like 2-7. And so he called up, and he said, "Al, I think that shuffle's a little outdated." And I said, "Well, Coach, what's your record up there?" And he said, "Well, we were 2-7." And I said, "Well, we're 7-1. I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll coach this team and you coach that team. And I thought, what did I just say? But he was right. And we never ran the shuffle again,
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a great basketball mind and a great motivator of players, I think. And, his players, a lot of times, they didn't like him for those 2 years, but they loved him the day after that.
Yeah.
Their sophomore year was over.
Well, I just, and I told my players this when I was coaching at Bevel. I mean, like, I don't think they understood how hard practice was. And, I mean, we would have a walkthrough, on game night, and it would be, or during the day, before a game. And I mean, we would go full speed for an hour and 20 minutes. We'd start going, you think you're going to get out of there in like 30 minutes or whatever. And you're just going to kind of walk through a few things, full blown practice, for an hour and 20 minutes before the game. And then I just think about the many nights that I walked away from Clem Gym. I lived in the dorm down there at Murphy Hall, and getting out of practice and walking that sidewalk to the cafeteria to eat. And I could barely walk. I mean, it would be so, practice was so hard that day, and had to ice my knees before I even got up, and I mean, there were a couple of instances where, I felt like he tried to kill us, and those were hard days. And, but the stories and and you knew he cared about you, and those are the things. And it's really amazing to me that, when you talk about somebody almost 30 years after they've passed away, they've left a living legacy.
Oh yes, everybody who was in Jasper during that time, even if they weren't basketball fans, they knew Coach Clem and respected him and loved him. I mean, this guy, he had the ability to attract people like a magnet to him. He was one of the great public speakers, by the way, that I've ever heard. I loved hearing him, talk to the Rotary Club or the Blue Tie Club.
Well, just going back to his camp, I mean, it's like, when you're a kid and you're at Clem's camp and he's putting on a show for you. I mean, you and I talked about it. I mean, he would sit at half court, cross his legs, and just, shoot half court shots and just drain them, and, we would talk about the coldest drinks in town, I mean, we'd have the free throw contest, and if you got knocked out, you'd go to Heartbreak Hotel, and, he would talk about if somebody, get their elbow out on their shot, that they're going to fly out of the gym, ban costume jewelry from camp, and those are just really vivid things that I remember about him. And it really just cemented his, I mean, like I said, he was just a legend. And those are kind of the things that cemented that in my mind,
I got to go to the Final Four one year, and I was with him most of the day, each day. And all the big name coaches across the country knew Coach Clem. He introduced me to just one after another. I mean, it was amazing. But, he's a junior college coach from Jasper, Alabama, and Bobby Knight and all these people knew who he was, and came over to see Jim Valvano. And it was just amazing.
Him and Wimp are big friends.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to tell the Winston story. I know you and I've told that one many times, but
I've heard this from a couple of people who were there, and there was a guy named Mac Mayers. I hope Mac doesn't care for me telling this story, but
Mac will forgive you.
Mac was from Millport, Alabama. He, it was a different era back then. Everybody smoked. Coach Clem smoked back then, and they were in the dorm room, and Mac was sitting there reading the paper, having a cigarette, and all of a sudden Coach Clem walked in, and he thumps a cigarette up under his bunk, and it hit the wall, and it kind of rolled back out to the edge of the bunk, and it was smoldering. Smoke was coming up, and Clem told them they had practice. This was Sunday morning. He said, we're going to have practice this afternoon at 3. And so, Mariario said he stayed in the shower till the water got cold and all. He didn't want to go in there because he knew Mac was smoking. So Coach Clem left, and they were like, "Did he see it? Did he see it?" And he said, "I don't know how he missed it with all that smoke coming up, but surely he would have said something." So he was really nervous about going to practice that day, and they went to practice, and Coach Clem didn't say anything. They went through practice. He never mentioned it. And so finally he told them to hit the showers, and you played there. They had to go up the stairs, and Mac was about halfway up the stairs going to the dressing room. He said, "Millport." And so Mac runs back down there, and Coach Clem had this way of talking out of the side of his mouth, and kind of looked around, and he said, "Did you burn your hand on that Winston this morning?"
And he would show up. I mean, like, he would just show up at the dorm at random times. I mean, so that continued throughout the years, and even when I was there, you'd just be sitting there, and then all of a sudden, here he is in the doorway.
Right.
6'5" frame, and it's like, and you're scared to death. But another story that comes to mind, I think Stan Eggers told this. I think they played, this would have been like maybe early 70s, and I think Walker College had played up at Gadsden and lost a tight contest up at Gadsden, and they went back on the bus, and I mean, it was like you could hear a pin drop on the bus, and typically they would stop and get something to eat on the way back to Jasper, and so it was just very quiet on the bus, and some sophomore in the back of the bus just all of a sudden says, "I'm hungry." And nothing, still you could hear a pin drop. And then again he says, "I'm hungry." And so anyway, they get back to Jasper. They don't stop. And they get back to Jasper, and Coach Clem tells them to pull into the handy dandy right there on 78 Highway, and sends the manager in. And he comes back, and he's got this black sack, and opens it up, and they've got packs of 6-pack of cheese crackers. And Clem just gets them out of there and says, "Here's your dinner," and just starts tossing them. And then of course there was a 1 a.m. Run session after that.
Right.
So, but that's another classic.
I wonder if that's the one where about 1 a.m. they met up there at the gym. Stan has told me this, and he told the manager, said, "Go get some black-eyed peas."
Yeah.
And he was like, "What?" And he said, "Go get some black-eyed peas." So he goes somewhere and comes back with some black-eyed peas, and he puts one down in front of every player, and he told them to get down on their hands and knees, and he made them run a suicide on their hands and knees, and they had to move the pea with their nose. He wasn't real happy about something.
There was another one where he would like lay down on the baseline, drinking a Coke or something, and he would make sure that your foot hit the baseline when you're doing suicides. And, there's just so many. But he was just. I know we can keep going on and on about Coach Clem, but I know you and him had such a special relationship, and for me that was when he passed away in '96. I mean, that was like I was a junior at Mississippi State, and I remember when I got the call, and my roommate said, "Hey, your mom called, your coach died," and I was like, "What?" And that was such a hard thing. What was that like for you? And I know you guys just had such a good friendship. And
yeah, I was at that time I was working at First National Bank. He died on a Friday night, and somebody called us. We'd gone up the break room. The bank didn't open till 9, just to drink a cup of coffee right quick, and somebody called us up there and told us about it, and I was stunned, but I still remember the next morning getting the newspaper, and the whole front page was about that, and I don't think anything's ever hit me that hard, It was just stunning. That wasn't my immediate family, but he was truly a legend, a small town legend.
Man, he was 59 years old.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I remember that, and it just seemed like he was older, but he
Yeah.
always seemed older than he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you couldn't, he was just so bigger than life.
Yeah. No doubt about it. I'm just so blessed and thankful to have been able to get to know him, during basketball camp, and just been able to play for him. And then, at some level, it was just such an honor for me to hold that same position. Not many people have. I mean, had the same position at Walker College, and that was a cool thing. And
Yeah.
And we've been able to write about him in the magazine many times, and just a special family, special person. So let's shift gears for a minute. I know you're a big golfer, and you love the game of golf. And before we wrap up, I kind of want you to talk a little bit about your golfing life, and what are some of your favorite experiences on the golf course?
Well, I grew up as a kid, started really playing. Well, I started playing when I was 10, but when I was 12, I really started getting into it. And there was a good group of guys around my age. Bart Adcott's, Bill Gibson, Tab Hudson was 2 years older than me. Steve Hudson's 2 years younger. So we had a good group of kids playing in junior tournaments and good high school program. And that was really special. Travis Hudson, who was Tab and Steve's father and was our pro at Musgrove, he was in a way a lot like Coach Clem. He was the kind of guy people respected, and he had a personality that attracted people to him, and he gave us a lot of great guidance and all. And I was in junior high school, and I started caddying during the Musgrove Invitational, and a friend of mine got to caddy for a guy who played in the last group that had the big gallery, and they were the leaders of the tournament on Sunday. And I thought that was so cool, and I thought someday I'd love to play in the last group of the Musgrove Invitational, and I got to do it 4 times in 4 different decades. So that's a big accomplishment to me. I wish I'd made my goal a little bit higher to win the darn thing, And the club championship there, we had a lot of great club championships, and I had 3 second place finishes, and 1 in match play and 2 in medal play, but never was able to get over the hump and win the thing. But decent player, but not a great player. But Musgrove's been really special to me for 58 years.
Now, one thing people may not know about you is that you also coached.
Yeah. Probably sports-wise was the greatest thing I ever did as far as enjoying it. Though for some reason, and I know they couldn't do something like this now, but they let me be the head 7th grade coach when I was a freshman in college, and then move up the next year and have the 8th grade. I had the same group of boys. And I went to Alabama the next year. I missed it so bad that I drove back and forth and did it 2 more years. But that was really special. And, I kind of just did what Coach Green did with us. So we did pretty good during that era right there, and really enjoyed it.
What's your favorite thing to do right now, sports-wise, or watch, or what's your fascination now?
Of course, I still love college basketball. Alabama, I'm an Alabama fan, and good little run this year. And I love Alabama football. I still love playing golf. I got injured last fall, and I'm kind of on the injured reserve right now, but I'm going to be back. But of anything, it's playing golf still.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd rather be playing something than
Yeah.
watching something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Al, one of the big traditions on the show is for our guests to sign the poster. So if you wouldn't mind doing the honors on that. Just wherever you feel like signing.
Thank you.
All right, man. Well, Al, it has been an absolute blast.
Been an honor.
Man, we really appreciate it, and appreciate you coming on the show. It's always good to see you and talk to you, and it means a lot that we were able to do this today. So
I appreciate you inviting me. I enjoyed it.
yeah, man. For Al McAdams, this is Al Blanton. Pick up a copy of 78 Magazine at a store near you, and we'll see you next time on The Lead. The Lead, sponsored by Lavish Boutique, Lavish Coffee, Jasper Veterinary Clinic, Jasper Bone and Joint, and Carl Cannon Chevrolet Buick GMC.